Hello and welcome to the podcast. In this episode I'm going to talk about Scotland's new hate crime law. And why is it so many people seem to hate it? To help me unpack the legislation, I'm going to use an article from STV, Scottish Television, which is titled Scotland's Controversial New Hate Crime Laws Explained. As usual, I won't read all the article. I'll put a link in the description, but hopefully I'll cover enough ground to give you a bit of an understanding and certainly to share my opinion. I'm not a lawyer. I've studied some aspects of law in the past, but definitely not a lawyer. And several lawyers have commented about this legislation, both good and bad. And I think that's how I feel about it as well. So, the legislation is described as a threat to free speech by some and as a vital protection for minorities by others. What does the new law say? The Hate Crime and Public Order Act essentially takes the current law against the stirring up of racial hatred and extends that protection to other groups. Good. Those protected characteristics are disability, religion, sexual orientation, age, transgender identity, and variations in sex characteristics. However, unlike the 1986 UK law on race, people must intend to stir up hatred against the other groups. Good. So far, so good. And yeah, let's look at the two tests, as they're called here, that must be met for someone to be found guilty of a hate crime. A person must engage in behaviour or communication that is perceived by a reasonable person to be threatening or abusive on the grounds of disability, religion, sexual orientation, age, transgender identity, or variations in sex characteristics. That list from earlier. A person must intend to stir up hatred on the basis of these protected characteristics. And so, yeah, I think that again sounds okay. Two things I'd pick out. The one is a reasonable person. What does it mean by a reasonable person? Do we have a definition? Are we sure that that might not shift and morph and change depending on circumstances? And could that be a problem? And also, intention must intend to stir up hatred. How do we define intention? The law will apply to behaviour and speech made both in public and in private, such as in a person's home. That separates this law from previous legislation around hate crimes. And I have to say, that part about in a person's home, that could be problematic. We will come back to that. Much of the pushback on the hate crime law has surrounded concerns about free speech. The head of complaints for the Scottish Police Authority, Katharina Casper, warned the Act could have a chilling effect on freedom of expression. It could. The Association of Scottish Police Superintendents warned the law could be weaponised by an activist fringe across the political spectrum. Could be weaponised by anyone. I think that's one of the issues. Michael Foran, a lecturer in public law at Glasgow Uni, said the Act could be a threat to free speech depending on how police enforce it. Police will enforce it depending or not, depending on how they are directed to enforce it. And who's giving the directions to the directors? What's the agenda? What's the direction of travel here? That's going to be important. There are quite robust protections for freedom of expression in the bill itself, but there's a concern here that they will only really enter into the picture once someone is entered into a courtroom. That's a bit scary. So the protection from freedom of expression might only kick in once someone's in a courtroom. That seems wrong. It would seem more reassuring if somehow that protection was there before it entered a courtroom. But again, we don't know at this point in time. And each case will be different. And he goes on to suggest Police Scotland could be overzealous. Well, I've said already, it depends how they're directed. I think it's going to be a tough job for the police, really difficult. This was echoed by Roddy Dunlop, KC, the Dean of the Faculty of Advocate, who warned of a danger of police being inundated with potentially trivial complaints by people who claim to have been insulted by something that's been said online, presumably also in person. Yeah, absolutely. I think there is a huge danger of the police being inundated with trivia, because people, sometimes like to make mischief. And let's go on here. A spokesperson for Police Scotland said victim recording was important to monitor tensions within communities, okay? And that hate incidents were not logged against perpetrators. What are they logged against? I don't know the answer to that. So, question mark there. Speaking to STV News on Monday, First Minister Humza Yousaf said he supported police recording non-crime hate incidents. This is where there is an incident, it's deemed not to be a crime, but it is still logged as a hate incident. It's important that they are recorded because what it does is it gives police an idea of where there might be spikes in hatred, he said. One of the issues, and a few people have pointed this out, with this idea of finding where there's hatred, is that if you consider that the police may be inundated, people may jump on the bandwagon and think, wow, this is great, I can air all my grievances, I can get this individual into some real trouble, I can make life difficult for them. Now, in the mix, of course, essential to say that there will be honest reporting which has to take place, but my suspicion is that there'll be an awful lot of noise and stuff that isn't actually hate related at all, but that will show up as spikes. This then could become a self-fulfilling prophecy, with the First Minister and whoever saying, hey, I told you we were right to introduce this, look at the hatred, it's everywhere. Is it? And also, why hatred? This is, in some ways, a strange word to use. It's obviously very evocative, but could it be that it's frustration? Could it be that it's annoyance, anger at times, and it's a flash in the pan, and it doesn't mean to say there's a seething bed of hatred there? It's just a blip. It's just a thing that can happen in life, potentially. STV News understands essentially that the enhanced disclosure scheme, well, it's unlikely that these hate incidents would be disclosed to employers. Unlikely. Why aren't women included in the Act? There's been outrage among some women's groups that MSPs, members of Scottish Parliament, decided to drop women as one of the protected characteristics in the bill. SNP MP Joanna Cherry said the law leaves women unprotected from hate crimes despite being one of the most abused cohorts in society. Asked by STV News why it dropped women from the list, the Scottish Government said it plans to introduce bespoke legislation on sexism in society. I hope the legislation's good. I think it's a good idea, again, to do that. Why it's not there now, I don't know. Why the delay? Maybe it's being very well thought through and will be great legislation. Let's hope so. Let's move on. Police Scotland and the hate monster controversy, or controversy. This, if you haven't seen it, it's a cartoon, the graphic of which was at the beginning of the podcast when I read out the title of this article. And it in some ways, it's a bit puerile, to be honest. It's very simplistic, and I don't think gets the point across at all, but that's just my opinion. Anyway, it's not just the Hate Crime Act that has seen criticism, but Police Scotland's campaign around it too. The Hate Monster campaign has been accused of stereotyping young working class men. SNP MSP Ivan McKee said police were demonising an already disadvantaged group that is heavily impacted by negative interactions with the criminal justice system. And that is a concern of mine. Absolutely. stereotyping, putting a group together and saying you're bad. Isn't that what the hate crime's meant to avoid? Anyway, a press release from Police Scotland said the hate monster represents that feeling some people get when they're frustrated and angry and take it out on others. Isn't that the frustration and anger monster? Rather than hate, but anyway, because they feel like they need to show they are better than them. In other words, they commit a hate crime. I don't know that that's what is actually happening within people when they get frustrated and angry, that it's a need to show they're better. It can be born of desperation, of anger at their plight. Not about, hey, I'm going to be hateful and towards you because it makes me feel that I'm better than you. I'm not sure about that at all. We know that young men, this is the press release, I believe, again from the same STV article, we know that young men aged 18 to 30 are most likely to commit hate crime, particularly those from socially excluded communities who are heavily influenced by their peers. Now, for me, this is very worrisome. This can begin to demonise young men in that age group, and particularly demonise those who are socially excluded and are influenced by their peers. Who else have they got but their peers? Yeah, they will be influenced. That's not a phenomenon which is unique to them. And a lot of young men need help. They need assistance, they need coaching, mentoring, sometimes therapeutic help as well. Economically, once in that particular spiral, it's awful. And the deprivation that is suffered, and it's not just young men either, of course, it can be all sorts of people. And so if they are angry, if they are frustrated, is that any wonder? And is it really a hate crime as such? I'm not saying that they couldn't commit a hate crime, but I think there's a much more complex thing going on here. And the article goes on, they may have deep-rooted feelings of being socially and economically disadvantaged. Yeah, I'm sure they do, combined with ideas about white male entitlement. I don't know where that's come from. I don't know what that's really meant to mean. If you've ever worked with or helped people or been in areas where there is true privation, generally speaking, in my experience, people are not thinking, hey, I'm white and male and therefore I'm entitled. What they may be thinking is, I'm in one of the richest countries on the planet. How come I don't have these opportunities? How come I can't seem to get anywhere? How come in many cases I was born into this and some potentially challenging familial environments, adverse childhood events, mental health issues that are going on, poor mental health that a lot of these young men and women suffer from in these deprived areas. But instead we're meant to say, yeah, it's the hate monster, and you're just trying to make yourself feel better than someone else, and it's to do with white male entitlement, and you're in that age bracket, 18 to whatever, 30. Isn't that labelling? Isn't that what this hate crime is meant not to do? So instead of saying, hey, we need to look at you guys. And remember also that we all look at the world through schemas, through frames of reference, through lenses. And there's a thing called priming, that if we're told to this group, well, hey, yeah, it's to do with white male entitlement, and we're told that in that age group, and if it's men, well, yeah, they're going to be problematic, there's a lot of hate, then what do people go in looking for? Rather than potentially going in to say, we really need to get funding, we really need to help you people out, and again, not just men. So I have some real problems with that wording. And then the article goes on to say, committing hate crime is strongly linked to a range of risk factors, including economic deprivation, adverse childhood experiences, as mentioned it, substance abuse and underemployment. Those who grow up in abusive environments can become addicted to conflict. Yeah, because that's how they communicate. It's what they've seen around them all their life. And they need help to communicate differently. But committing a hate crime, is it? Is that what that would be? In the mix, yeah, there must be that. Probably. Let's not rule it out. But to lump all these people together and say, you're the epicenter of this. You're the epicenter of deprivation. You're the epicenter of people, young people who need help, not to be demonized. And then, if you've been a victim of a hate crime, luckily you can go to a farm or a sex shop. Can't even say it. I kid you not. It's not the only place you can report a hate crime. Though the news at a sex shop or a mushroom farm could be too a place you could report. Caught many by surprise. You can also phone these numbers. Third-party reporting centres have been used for decades in Scotland, often in libraries, charities that can help people report crimes when they don't feel comfortable going to the police. Again, in of itself, not a bad thing, a good thing. But just to add to the April the 1st feeling when that legislation came out. And we'll come back to this and I'll finish on this. The law will apply to behaviour and speech made both in public and in private, such as in a person's home. I really think that could cause all sorts of issues. If you think about it, you're sitting around the dining room table, whatever you want to call it, dinner table, you're chilling out, you make a joke, somebody takes offence. Oh, I thought it was funny. Let me explain to you why it wasn't. Oh, okay, now you've explained it, I realise that it wasn't. Too late. I'm down at the mushroom farm, you're reported. Or somebody's trying to be ironic or satirical, or indeed just says something in the heat of the moment. Then what normally happens would be somebody would say, I think that's quite offensive to those people. I think you should rethink that. Here's my opinion. And so the problem, the issue, will often get ironed out. People in that sense are coached and mentored and shown different ways. People need role models. They need to understand what is going on with their own emotional landscape. They need help. They need support. But this way, when people are relaxing, unguarded, and they say something, that could be weaponized. And so let's just imagine it is one of these young men. They've seen this conflict. They are frustrated, fearful, perhaps angry, and they say something. And then someone goes, oh, that's it. You're being reported. What is that? What spiral does that put that individual in? Rather than they're taught, they're helped. And you could argue, well, maybe it's a wake-up call and they will sort themselves out. Or you could argue that it further reinforces their feeling that the world is against them. I'm not saying that some things should not be picked up on, that people shouldn't be pulled up on their comments and remarks. But up until now, we've pretty much managed to take care of that ourselves. The tentacles of the government have not reached into the middle of a conversation in the privacy of someone's home. And think also about the fact that what we're doing when we say things out loud is we're looking for the reaction. It's how we learn. We think, oh, I shouldn't have said that. That's a healthier way. Yes, if there's a festering hotbed of hatred, we need to know about that. But the capacity for this to be hugely, massively misused, I think, is gigantic. I think it's really dangerous. And how long before we've got our little Alexas and Siris, etc., listening out and dialing the mushroom farm automatically? Sci-fi? Ridiculous? Well, until this came in, some people would have thought this law was ridiculous. It certainly has the ability to be quite Orwellian if we're not very, very careful.